Good evening, everyone. My name is Roberto Veloso, and I'm the chair of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission. For members of the general public watching our meeting for the first time, the Human Relations Commission is a part of the Anne Arundel County government. It was created for the purpose of promoting and enhancing the ability of all Anne Arundel County residents to pursue their lives free of discrimination. To accomplish this goal, the Human Relations Commission has been charged with the legislative mandate to enforce Anne Arundel County's fair housing law and work toward the elimination of discrimination in the county. If you believe you have been a victim of discrimination in housing and wish to bring some other matter relating to discrimination in Anne Arundel County to the Commission's attention, please contact us using the contact information on the Human Relations Commission webpage on the Anne Arundel County government website. The Commission is meeting today pursuant to Section 3-5A-106 of the Anne Arundel County Code for the purpose of conducting business required to perform its statutorily mandated duties. It is now 6:01 p.m. and the meeting of the Anne Arundel County Human Relations Commission will come to order. Commissioner Dodoni, Madam Secretary, will you please conduct the roll call?
Yes, as I call your name, please unmute and say your name. Tosin Hadboa. I'm sorry, Tosin.
Present.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Mark Aptar is not with us yet. I will record his presence and ask him to speak when he arrives. Commissioner Clapsaddle. Please unmute so we have
Joseph
your voice.
Clapsaddle present.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Hatcher is not yet with us, nor is Commissioner Gaskin. And
Commissioner Dodoni, Commissioner Hatcher, and Commissioner Gaskin have excused absences this evening.
Thank you. Excuse me while I make those appropriate entries in my spreadsheet. Commissioner Peterson.
Present.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Syed is not yet with us. I will note when he arrives. This is Commissioner Dodoni speaking. Commissioner Veloso.
Present.
Thank you very much.
All right, I believe we needed 5, given that we have 9 current voting members. We need 5 for a quorum. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have a quorum. Also want to note for the record that we have Joella Ridgeway, the interim human relations officer, who's also the deputy director of aging and disabilities here. Thank you for joining us, Joella. Can you just check your microphone, make sure we could hear you?
Evening, everyone.
And we also have Megan Brown, the coordinator for the county boards and commissions. Megan, can you just acknowledge your presence that you're here?
Good evening, everyone.
Great, thank you. All right, moving along the agenda, have a couple of announcements regarding the commissioners' rosters. As many of you have heard, Commissioner Toni Strong Pratt, her term expired and she declined to be reappointed. She's leaving on with no ill will. You're probably going to be hearing from her shortly because she plans on running for public office, and that's why she elected to depart from the commission. So we'll be hearing from her shortly if you follow the newspapers. Next item on the agenda, I was going to introduce our new student commissioner. Unfortunately, because we had to reschedule the meeting from Thursday until today, our new student commissioner had a conflict of interest and couldn't be here tonight. So we'll go ahead and table her introduction until the next meeting. I've been in touch with her. I've met with her. I'm encouraging her to follow along by taking a look at the videos of our commission meetings and to have her provide us with any feedback she has and perspective as a student in Anne Arundel County. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, we've got approval of minutes from our January 21 meeting. The minutes were previously circulated. Are there any corrections or omissions that need to be addressed? Okay, hearing that there are no corrections or omissions that need to be addressed, can we have a motion to approve and adopt the minutes as drafted?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. The minutes are approved and adopted as drafted. Next item on the agenda is commissioner updates and reports. We're going to start with our human relations officer today. Joelle, if we could just go ahead and please
Sure.
please share with us any news that you have, any updates that you should be aware of.
Great. Thank you for having me. Good evening, everyone. Joelle Ridgeway, Interim Human Relations Officer for County Executive Pittman's office. In terms of administrative updates, Megan Brown, who is also at the meeting tonight, is the new Boards and Commissions Coordinator. Her and I met and are working through how best to support this group. So I feel like we're well on our way. I also met with Roberto, the chair, to discuss how I could best support the commission going forward. I've begun a tracking system for all inquiries, complaints, and investigations that are received by the Human Relations Office. And I will be sharing metrics with you each month at our meetings based on that data collection. And I think you know, but I also wear another hat that I'm the ADA coordinator for Anne Arundel County government. And as a result, I do have access to some data from the ADA office as it pertains to calls that office receives that has to do with fair housing and disability. So I have data from 2017 to the present. I'm working on trying to put that together to give you some idea. I know one of the interests of this group is to sort of understand what the issues are that people are facing in Anne Arundel County as it pertains to housing and other areas of discrimination. So I think that data might be helpful to you to get some perspective on what people experience with disability in terms of housing. So that's my goal there. And updates from the county executive's office. Dr. K could not be here tonight, and she sends her regards. Our COVID case rate is about 13.9% and has decreased and is looking much better. Hospitalizations are also decreasing as they've been under 100 total beds since 2/1. In terms of the vaccine, we continue to be vaccinating people that are in 1A and part of 1B, which is 75 and older. We encourage people to pre-register in our system, regardless of what phase of the vaccine you feel like you would fall into. Getting into our system has you there for if and when your phase comes up. So even if you're in phase 2, you can still pre-register now. The county executive has started sending out a weekly report with a message to the community on status updates for the vaccine. There are locations and links you can sign up for a vaccine and other resource information. You can sign up for this and I can put this in the chat and also share it with you to put in your minutes, but it's www.annearundelcounty.org/coronavirus/weekly-COVID-update. In terms of upcoming events, the third annual Few of Many is on 2/23 at 5 o'clock and it will be virtual. The Gun Violence Intervention Team community meeting is tomorrow, February 24th at 3 o'clock. And on Wednesday, we're having our first Interfaith Advisory Council meeting at 6 o'clock. In terms of statistics, I feel like it's easiest to report on the 30 days, the month prior, the calendar month. So in January 2021, when I started on 1/20-ish, in those 11 days, I received 4 reports from the police department. Only 2 of these reports ended up being reportable to the state. The Anne Arundel County Police Department is very transparent, and any police incident that involves race, bias, etc., they fill out one of these reports and send it to my office to make sure that there's another set of eyes on it and to make sure that that we all know what's going on in the county. Categories for the month of January that I received reports for were destruction of property, assault, altercation, and harassment. In terms of the Human Relations Office, I received 2 calls in the month of January in that 11 days. One was a complaint that I think was initiated with the Human Relations Commission, but by way of process, the Human Relations Officer works through the complaint first. I found that it did not meet the criteria under the fair housing law in Anne Arundel County, and I did provide resources and a letter with those resources to the complainant. And there was one complaint about a landlord-tenant issue, which I was able to help give the individual resources and sort of navigate through the system in terms of where they could get some assistance with their what they were experiencing where they live. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Joel, tell me a little bit more about the Interfaith Council. What is it, a commission?
No, it's a council. It's bringing together groups of people from the faith community. It's been something I think that we've been trying to do for some time to generate connection, but also outreach in terms of making sure that we reach everybody in the county. It's based on a very diverse group of, religious backgrounds, which then includes, a lot of diversity in terms of membership.
Who selects the members?
That I don't know. If you give me a minute, I will look it back up.
And how large is this commission?
I can answer that question.
Oh, good. Hi, Megan.
Hi. So the county executive is the one who has the final say in the members, and then it's 19 members on the commission.
Commissioner Clapsaddle, this is the same group Dr. Kay spoke to us about when she was here, either last month or the month before that.
Right. I just said.
Yes.
Sorry. I think this is we should have a close relationship with them.
I agree. So Commissioner Dodoni has her hand raised.
Thank you very much. I want to speak to 2 points. Thank you, Human Relations Officer Ridgeway.
You're welcome.
I very much appreciate the stats. Can you say something about the overlapping of reports of hate bias incidences from the school to the police to the reports that you forward to the state? I don't believe they overlap entirely, but they're not entirely separate either. Could you help me? And then I have another. In terms
of incidents that happen within the schools.
Sure, let's take that as a starting point.
I have not received or seen any reports as they pertain to the schools, but I'm happy to find out what that process is.
Let's wait until it happens.
Okay.
My understanding is that through the SROs and the citation process, those will be entered into the police database, and from there may come to you, but there's no need to look at it right now.
Okay.
My second point is a footnote on the faith leaders group. There is another faith leaders group that has a different emphasis, overlapping membership, different emphasis, and that's Anne Arundel Connecting Together, ACT. Faith-based organization. Much of the leadership there is clergy and religious leadership. So as we look to build our relationships with the communities and being particularly aware of the interest groups within ACT for fair housing and the challenges they've experienced, that may be another group that we want to consider establishing relationship with.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Commissioner Clapsaddle.
Yes. Commissioner Dodoni, would you suggest then that we have Chair Veloso invite a representative of these 2 groups and other groups to appear at one of our meetings and speak to us so that we'll have a good understanding of what their objectives are and we can share what our objectives are?
I will be delighted to make a motion to that effect, and it would anticipate your seconding it. Is that appropriate, Chairman Veloso?
No problem at all with that if that's how we wish to proceed.
Or we can just ask you.
We have a motion on the floor. Can we have a second to go ahead and invite these two groups? Time permitting, perhaps we could try to have them at our March meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Dodoni, I'm going to ask for your help in terms of following up. Juggling a number of things right now. I'm afraid of letting this thing drop. So
we know exactly how this is going for both of us, and the answer is yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Anything else for our interim human relations officer? Any other questions? Okay. Moving right along here on the agenda. Hate bias incidents. We had a meeting, or a number of the commissioners met with Major Goodwin to discuss incident handling procedures when the county police receives a report of a hate or a bias incident. Just by way of very, very brief summation, the difference between a hate incident and a bias incident is that a hate incident qualifies as a hate crime, usually because it involves property damage or physical assault, whereas a bias incident will not involve either property damage or an assault. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask our Human Relations Liaison to see if I'd asked the major to send the budget item for an FTE to help with the hate bias incident. It was in last year's budget. Could we get a copy of that budget item and see what it entailed?
Is this the community relations position that was going to be reporting to Major Goodwin? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Do you remember what the position was called? Do you remember anything?
No, but it shouldn't be that hard to find it in the police budget. Is that possible?
So that I'm clear, the question is, you'd like me to follow up with Major Goodwin to find out about the community relations position.
That would be great.
And if it's in this year's budget, are you asking, is that part of the question?
Well, it was in, I think it was in last year's budget. It didn't get funded. So it's a two-part question. Like to see it and like to know if the police department and the county executive supports that FTE, because that, I think without that, she's a one-armed paper hanger and it's not going to work.
No, Commissioner Peterson, you were at that meeting with Major Goodwin. Was this one of the things that came up during that discussion?
Yes, because I asked her about any funding needs they had, and she mentioned that this was a budget item. So I said, well, I'm sure the commission would like to see it and possibly be a strong advocate after we discussed it, of course, as a commission for this position. I mean, I went through a similar issue with the school district when I was on the board, found out that we had homeless students, but we didn't have a homeless coordinator. It was the director of it, I think the psychologist that was doing it. So I got busy and I kept hammering at it, and eventually we got a homeless coordinator. And that's the same kind of coordination function I think the major needs.
I will follow up and see what information I can get on that.
That's great.
Report next month.
Excellent. Super. Commissioner Peterson, Commissioner Dodoni, both of you were at the meeting. I couldn't make it. Is there anything else you want to share with the commission with respect to that meeting? I understand it was a productive meeting, and Major Goodwin and calls it like she sees it, and she's pretty straightforward and she's pretty committed to the job. But is there anything you want to share with us that came up during the meeting?
I just say that the department continues to be very transparent in terms of how they address these issues. We talked about a broad range of topics, including the incident with the hijabs and what happened in that incident. And the major agreed that this could possibly be something that was maybe something that needed to be addressed through either a training bulletin or some emphasis on training. Although they do train uh, the police officers in how to address these issues, and it's just an ongoing issue that I think needs more support for her to extend her reach, let's say, in the department.
I
Commissioner,
want to,
go ahead.
I want to second that. We looked at the policies and the data pretty deeply. And thank you, Commissioner Peterson, for the depth with which you examine the policies and procedures related to this. We could find no flaw in the written policies or procedures. They look good. Major Goodwin's commitment is obvious. The thoroughness in the programs are obvious. And despite all of this, we still have hate bias incidents. I don't want to say that the program isn't working. I have no idea what it would be like if it weren't there. It's a program that has it reaches out, it sends people on site, even knowing that this will never result in an arrest or a citation of any sort. I suggested there, and I suggest here, we're seeking to transform a community, and we need many tools, and I think interfaces to do that. So we discussed that briefly on the meeting with Major Goodwin, and she seemed to respect that as well. I feel it's worth highlighting. So often the criticism is levied on a segment of society, of our social structure, an institution, and I do not see that any institution has the power to solve what is now a systemic society-wide problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Dodoni. As just to remind you all, one of the recommendations we made in our annual report is that the county executive consider setting up by executive order, a separate standalone hate bias group of county citizens that would be devoted to this issue of trying to educate the community and provide support to the community when these incidents that don't rise to the level of a hate crime, but it's still something involving hate that we don't want in our community, we don't want in the county, to have them, hopefully this group could provide better support than we certainly can with the limited resources that the commission has. But moving on down the line on the agenda, the next item on the agenda, I can report to you all, we had total numbers for 2020 in terms of hate bias incidents. Over 62 cases reported in 2020, which is a decrease from 81. I shouldn't call them cases. The police received 62 hate bias reports in 2020. In 2019, the police received 81 hate bias reports. Majority of those did not rise to the level of a hate crime, so they were just reported to the Maryland State Police as bias incidents. I personally think that the decrease is due to the pandemic restrictions and the social distancing that occurred. So I think that's why the numbers decreased as opposed to really any other change in the county. And I am going to be speaking with the county executive in about 2 weeks or so and about all the recommendations we made in our annual report. And I know this is one of the things that I'm going to be discussing with him, trying to see what we could do, how the county can implement a more proactive plan in terms of dealing with these incidents. It's pretty clear to me, and I think you all would agree, that just the police can't do it alone. So I see, Mary, do you have a comment you want to share?
Only to confirm your that my assumption about the reduction in numbers follows your assumption, particularly having been told in the past that a number of the incidents that feed up through the system do originate from the school system, and knowing that the incidence of, we'll call them generically hate bias reports, um, bias behavior and hate language reports coming out of the school system were greatly reduced because of virtual education versus in-person contact among the students.
Commissioner Clapsaddle, you had a comment? Question?
Yes. Words matter, actions matter. And Mary and Commissioner Veloso, would it be appropriate for us to consider when these incidences of hate bias occur, that the individuals involved be subpoenaed to appear before us so we can understand them directly, rather than here, or would we be overstepping our bounds?
You know, we only have subpoena power when it comes to fair housing complaints. We could certainly hold a community hearing about an incident occurring, but in terms of actually calling for an individual to come forth and provide testimony, only with respect to fair housing. And I see go ahead.
We could not then, I'm asking you, we could not then just request them to appear?
Oh, we could certainly invite them to appear, but we could not subpoena them or require them to appear.
Would we be able to question them? If
only if they wanted to speak with us, and given that frequently this is something that potentially could turn into a crime, I would suspect most people would decline to that are being accused of being a perpetrator of one of these incidents would be willing to speak with us. I think individuals that have been on the victim end of it, I wouldn't be surprised if they were willing to talk to us.
The thing is, Commissioner Veloso, is that we represent the community as a whole, and we have stature, and these cases need to be accountable to us too.
I don't disagree, and this was really, again, what was behind the idea of trying to implement an approach similar to what was implemented in Montgomery County, which is of setting up a separate community body to focus on these incidents. As you know, our main mandate is to enforce the fair housing law, and we have a lot of work to do in that regard. I'm not saying that this issue of hate crimes and bias incidents isn't important. It is, but there's only so many hours in the day. Commissioner Clapsaddle, before you came on the commission, it was almost a year ago to the date, we had a forum at the community college, and the Human Relations Commission took the lead and partnered with a number of other local organizations, including the public schools, the community college, and we had a very good forum, which was a very good first step in this conversation with the community of what can we do to combat this issue. Unfortunately, about a month later, the COVID pandemic and all the restrictions hit. So our efforts on that front have been significantly curtailed. But I think it's an important thing we want to keep working on. I'm seeing a bunch of other hands going up. So go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't disagree with the intent of Commissioner Clapsaddle, but we got to remember that we're part of a spoke in a wheel. And my concern would be, as you said, some of these things may turn into a legal issue. And the other concern is don't want to muddy the investigation. Sometimes these police investigations, as we saw in the case in Glen Burnie, take some time to resolve. And so I think that we would have to let all those things exhaust before we would offer people to come in. And then in a lot of these instances, they are effectively dealt with referring them to our mediation efforts in the county. That has shown some success. The issues in the school district need to be fully investigated and adjudicated by the school district, because we're talking about student discipline. And having been on the board, I know the board would be reluctant to have any of that information out before they made their decision. So we need to, I think, be careful. But I think Commissioner Clapsaddle makes a good point.
Commissioner Dodoni, you're on mute.
thank you for the opportunity to speak. We'll each be aware of organizations that delve into this area based on what groups we work with. I'm aware that the the United Black Clergy of Anne Arundel County occasionally will actually hold public forums. They've done that over incidents that have happened several times. I'm aware that these discussions come up in front of the Caucus of African American Leaders as individual issues. I'm aware that the NAACP Youth and College Chapter had been tracking every one of the reported incidents. We know the school system tracks every one of them, but they do not report out in any detail because of the protections that are equivalent, in many ways similar to the protections we see under the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, the personnel records that never get shared. So if we step into this area, I strongly suggest we do it in collaboration with these other bodies. And I know the Muslim Council has stepped in with us, not us, but some of the groups I've been with sometimes, where we're all involved parties. It is this discussion is leading me to be more and more passionate about Chairman Veloso's recommendation that there be a coordinating point for all of this.
Mhm.
For instance, the Muslim Council, in response, I think, to the incident that happened up in Glen Burnie with these young women wearing hijabs at a Food Lion parking lot, they held an event. Unfortunately, it happened to coincide with our December commission meeting, but I really think we could benefit from some coordination because there are various groups that are working on this issue. And hopefully I can convince the county executive that this might be a step that he could take without a whole lot of effort that might help to continue to move the county in the right direction. I think we are going in the right direction. The thing that gives me some hope is what I hear from Major Goodwin, and when she talks about getting, especially the young kids that say stupid things and don't realize what they're doing, and what happens when they have a conversation with them and they tell them that, hey, these are just words, but they have an impact on people. And the Anne Arundel County Conflict Resolution Center program where they provide the mediation. I feel that we're starting to move in the right direction. We just have a lot of work to do. It's a big battle for hearts and minds, and we play a role, and I'd love to have us play a bigger role, but we're stretched thin. And one of the things I'm really hoping that we can get a lot more traction on in this year as well with respect to the fair housing issue. And just, so I don't want to drop this. It's a really important issue. And by all means, if you all have ideas on things we could recommend, things that we could do to help improve the situation, change the atmosphere in the county, let's discuss it. So moving right along, the next item on the agenda is still related to this issue of hate and bias incidents. I was contacted by Major Goodwin around February 9th, February 10th. There was a pretty bad, and this would qualify as a hate crime, up in Brooklyn Park. There was an incident where 4 vehicles were spray painted with, I don't know the nature of the graffiti, but it was racially disparaging language spray painted on them. And I know, well, based on what Major Goodwin mentioned to me, they're still investigating. They're looking for surveillance video in the area. I believe it was 3 unknown males, age 14 to 18, that are suspected of being involved in the incident. And detectives continue to canvass the neighborhood and looking for surveillance cameras that might provide some evidence. When I heard about this, this seemed bad enough that I thought, pardon me, it might be good in the ideal world that there would be some support to these individuals that are on the receiving end of this hate. And I spoke with our human relations officer about trying to see if we could get the county executives, constituent affairs folks involved. Human relations officer Ridgeway, were you able to get in touch with the? Actually, I believe they were copied on one of the emails that we had. Do you know if they were ever able to contact the individuals that were victimized here? Do you know what happened with that?
I don't. I will get a follow-up for you on that.
Okay.
I apologize.
again, I don't know to what they would be able to do, especially given that this is an active police investigation. But again, to whatever degree we can support or at least convey the message to these individuals that were the victims of this racial graffiti, that this is not something that we tolerate in the county. I think that would be a good thing. So yeah, that'd be great if you could report next month. We appreciate that. And I will keep you posted with respect to anything I hear with respect to this incident. And again, the reason this was significant is that this is a case that would clearly fall under the Maryland hate crimes law because of the graffiti that was put on the vehicles, and there was property damage. So I will keep you all posted. Any questions? All right. Next item on the agenda. Anne Arundel County Police Department has a serious incident review board, and Commissioner Peterson, after our human relations officer left, we were contacted by the police department and asked if someone from the commission could sit on the review board, because ordinarily the human relations officer sits on the review board. And Commissioner Peterson was very graciously agreed to participate on one of their meetings. And as I understand it, this serious incident review board, everything has to be held in confidentiality. So I know there's not a whole lot of detail that Commissioner Peterson can share with us, but I think he could talk to us about the process and what happened. And I'd love for him to share anything he can with respect to that and the role that the serious incident review board plays in providing police oversight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd start out by saying that because of confidentiality, I really can't say as much as I would like to say, but I participated. There is one citizen from the county that is also there. The chairman and I talked about this, and I think one of the things that we might recommend to both the police chief and the county executive is expanding the number of citizens on this board because we don't have a civilian review board right now. This deals with serious incidents like shootings and other kinds of incidents of that nature. I was thoroughly involved. The one thing I will say is you got to do your homework. They have the whole file. They give you the opportunity to go in and look at the file. I took advantage of that opportunity, and I can tell you that that was very helpful in the discussion that followed, because at the meeting, they give you summations, stuff, pictures and other things, but you get the whole report and all the incident reports from the different officers and command staff involved when you go and read the whole report. I think it's transparent, it's open. We had a robust discussion about all kinds of issues, and I think it's an effective body that focuses not on the incident so much as how the incident unfolded and what recommendations they can make for training, policy changes, and those kind of things. So I would be happy to continue. Hopefully we won't have many of these, but I would be happy to continue right now as your representative. And I would be able to, again, give you a report, something like this in the future.
Commissioner Peterson, do you know if the community representative is a voting member of this group?
The way that the process works is we make recommendations. There is no vote. We don't vote on issues. And I think that's appropriate because we're all sharing viewpoints and whatnot. And it's up to the police department to take our recommendations and decide what they're going to do in terms of, and it was openly discussed about some revisions that could be made, revisions that had been made in terms of policy and direction and that kind of thing. So I think it functions well as it is currently structured.
And so it's by consensus. You basically, the group comes up with a consensus in terms of what the recommendations.
Yeah, we try as much as we can to come up with. We ask very pointed questions, and then we get responses, and then the command staff that runs the meeting says, okay, let's go through what we talked about, and we discuss this issue, and this happened, we discuss this happened, and we go through the litany as a summary.
Human Relations Officer Ridgeway, I know you're only our Human Relations Officer on an interim basis, but do you know if this has been something that has been tacked onto your duties, or?
I just made myself a note of it because, and I meet with Dr. K on Wednesday, and I have some follow-up to do with police anyways. So it is what I wanted to find out if it's going to be a human relation, if it's always a human relations office duty. One of the things that I'm trying really hard to do for all of you is that when you get the new person, I will have everything sort of bundled up with a bow on top so that they sort of know the scope of the work, and you don't spend time teaching me and then having to teach someone else. So I'd like to help with that. So I will find out and let you know.
You have our eternal gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. So, okay. Moving right along. Unfortunately, Commissioner Hatcher couldn't be here this evening. She told me she would not be here. Next item on the agenda is the production of the public service announcement, and our brave group of commissioners, Commissioner Hatcher, Commissioner Klopsaddle, Commissioner Peterson, I know have met at least once, and they're talking about trying to move forward in terms of putting something together that we could use to reach out to our target audience using social media and other various mass media communications. Commissioner Klopsaddle, do you have something you want to share with us?
I think you should know that we are very close to getting a concept. And it turns out that because of the timing, we have reached out to both St. John's and to the Anne Arundel County Community College. We've heard nothing from St. John's. We did have a wonderful meeting, and Commissioner Hatcher and Commissioner Peterson and I were all on this with Anne Arundel Community College. And we met with Gwendolyn Johnson and Teresa Ballard. And what we learned was that there are two areas that the community college could be helpful to us on. One would be a learning, and one would be a community service. And I'll let Gene talk about that if he would like. But we're a little late on both. And because of timing, Commissioner Hatcher has someone in mind who can help us with the creative side. And I think we're going to come up with something that really not only will achieve the goal that we have, but will be something that will be creatively interesting.
Yeah, I might add that the two opportunities, one are internships, which take somebody that would actually monitor them and have some expertise, because you're trying to help them get something on their resume and produce a product. And the other is service learning, which the woman who heads up service learning talked about service learning as an activity that could happen as a class like experience. And she said she would go back and take a look and see if that could be started up. But both of them said, the trains kind of left the station and suggested that I believe it was Joe, was it fall would be the appropriate time to inquire about those kind of activities. So then Lakeisha came up with the idea. She has a person that she knows. I think there's some church involvement there. Not really, my memory's kind of going, can't recall, and I don't remember right now. But the bottom line is she has someone she can identify that could help us immediately, as Joe said, get moving with some production of storyboard and the kind of sequence that would lead to a spot. Is that about it, Joe?
Yes, I think so. I do want to emphasize that I felt a very strong interest from Anne Arundel Community College to work with us, even though
agreed.
Right now, it isn't possible. The thing that we have to remember is it's not like when I was in college, where if we had an opportunity to be an intern, we were happy to have the experience, because most of the college students today who, enter into these internships expect to be paid. And of course, we have no budget. So there are all kinds of things that are going on here that we'll work our way through.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for giving us an update. I just want to take this opportunity. I've had this conversation with Commissioner Clapsaddle, and I want to share this, some of my thoughts with respect to the PSA with all of you, and have you all weigh in if you have any other ideas. But again, my thought was that this PSA would be something that hopefully we could get the county to help us blast it out using their social media. That, and also like if we could put it up on Arundel TV, Facebook. I know we have a Facebook page, but I believe it's been dormant since Reverend. Somebody help me out here.
Watts.
Thank you, Reverend Watts. Left us. I think the account is he still has control of the account, but it's something that we should try to use. And I think Commissioner Didoni brought up a good point. I think it was Carl Snowden that said, heck, we should reach out to places like Arundel Live. They might be willing to run it on their big Megatron screens up there. That would certainly be a way to get the message out that we're here and that we're here to help. So I think you guys you've got some traction. Go forth and do what you can. Keep pushing and move this thing forward and make it a reality. I had a conversation with our human relations officer with respect to social media. I'm kind of moving on to the next item on the agenda, and that's at one point in her life, she was the chair of the county's disabilities commission. And I told her, oh, great, we can pick your brain and rely on your knowledge and experience doing that to see how we can more effectively reach out to everyone in Anne Arundel County. And I know she mentioned Facebook. And is that, Joelle, is that something, can you tell me a little bit, share with us a little bit about how you used your Facebook page for the Disabilities Commission to connect with the community? Yeah.
So the Anne Arundel County Commission on Disability Issues does have their own Facebook page. It is, the administrative account is with Anne Arundel County Department of Aging and Disabilities, just because there's often, there's eventual turnover in terms of commissions members, as there is in county government, but it at least would stay, connected to the government body. With administrative privileges to somebody on the commission. So there was a public relations subcommittee on the Commission on Disability Issues, and they would either post things to that site or ask one of us to post it. And it would include things like upcoming events, public service announcements, connection to resources that might be out there as it pertains to the disability community, new programs, services, etc.
Can you tell us about engagement? What kind of engagement you got with the community with respect to the Facebook page, if you remember?
We have a decent amount of engagement. So I have not looked at it recently, but there's a decent amount of people that follow it and look to that site for disability information. We would post a lot of things that came from other groups like Maryland Commission on Civil Rights or Maryland Disability Rights Now. They used to be Disability Law Center, but they changed their name. So other resources like that we would share and connect people to that. We had some other events that we did with that commission. We did outreach specific events. And one was we did an Artists Without Limits every year. And we would showcase our events on there. We would get people to register for events through Facebook also. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sure.
I'm gonna put an open call out for a volunteer who'd be willing to at least while they're serving on the commission, run our Facebook page. I'm not sure if anybody is dying to work on that opportunity. Are you, if that's something that they would enjoy? I mean, I have a Facebook page myself, but I don't think I've been on there since, I don't think I've been on there this year. So anyone that, it's an open call, I'll bring it up again next meeting. Think about it if you feel inclined or motivated. Let us know, because we could certainly use some help. Talking to Reverend John Watts and getting the admin privileges on that, so we could maybe start trying to use it again. So
the other thing is that I'd be happy to, if it's easier, if people want to send me information that should be posted, that is in some ways what we did on the Commission on Disability Issues also, is that, you come across something that you think is important, you forward it to me in an email, and I can get it up on Facebook.
Okay. Commissioner Clapsaddle?
Think about.
I think part of what you're reaching out for is way beyond my pay grade in terms of technology. But I do think that if a member of our commission and our student commissioner could work together, I think that's a good idea, because young people know how this all works very well. And we're trying to be, 21st century. So that's an idea for you to explore.
Yeah, I did have some conversations with our student commissioner about getting involved with social media. We're going to have one problem with the student commissioner, and that's that she's graduating in May, which is coming up really quickly. And I need to talk to Krask about how they're going to handle getting somebody to replace her. Krask is I forget what that stands for, but it's the student body group that from whom our student commissioner gets selected from. But I will bring that up with her and see if maybe she can help us out even for the next couple of months, possibly over the summer. But thank you, Commissioner Clapsaddle. Thank you, Human Relations Officer Ridgeway. Moving right along here with the agenda, report from the Indianapolis Human Relations Commission Liaison, Commissioner Hatcher. Is that liaison? She sent me some notes to share with you. Let's see, Annapolis commissioners are working to develop a proposal to Mayor Buckley and the City Council with providing a framework for a civilian advisory panel to assist with investigating alleged police misconduct. So they have they've appointed this body, and they are studying it, and they're going to be submitting a recommendation to the City of Annapolis Mayor and City Council. They had a guest speaker, Alderman Brooks Schandelmeyer, who apparently spoke about police reform bill that they are working on in the City of Annapolis that would add language with respect to preventing white supremacists and other far-right extremists from gaining employment with the Annapolis Police Department. And last but not least, that training that we took back in October with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, Dimensions of Diversity, the Annapolis Human Relations Commission is trying to get a group together to take that training too. And that's all she has, but I just wanted to share that with you all. Next item on the agenda, County Council updates. Commissioners Didoni and Clapsaddle, if you have anything you want to share with us, that'd be great.
Commissioner Clapsaddle, did you want to add anything?
No, I will leave this in your good hands. I saw nothing that I should report on.
I want to acknowledge the County Council's engagement with the resolution condemning violence at the U.S. Capitol.
I think that was important, yes.
Okay, anything else? Are you there, Commissioner Didoni?
Yes, nothing else from me
Okay.
on this.
Okay, great. Moving right along, community outreach. I am on the agenda for the NAACP meeting as chair of the Human Relations Commission on Saturday, March 20th, if I recall correctly. And I am going to speak with them regarding our Fair Housing Authority, our plans in terms of communicating with county residents regarding our Fair Housing Authority, and we're here to try to help with that. I'm also going to share with them the recommendations we made in our annual report, and encourage them to help us get the word out, especially on the fair housing side of it. We want to know if people are experiencing discrimination when they're trying to rent or purchase a property. And also, if we, to the degree they're willing to share information with us regarding discrimination they hear about in the county, even though we may not be empowered to act, we certainly want to take note of it. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would add to what you are going to say that you should point out proactively after the George Floyd murder, we had our statement posted on the county website. I think that dovetails with a lot of the recommendations that then we followed up with in our report.
I will do that. I'm hoping I can tell them even more after we have a discussion in just a few minutes regarding police reform.
Thank you.
So, great. Commissioners, I have an apology to make. I dropped the ball with respect to the Spanish version of our brochure. I started working on it only to encounter significant formatting issues. And I need to set aside some time to go ahead. The language has been translated. It's just a matter of formatting it using the .pub Microsoft application. So hopefully by March, I'll have that and we can roll that out. All right, anything else with respect to community outreach? Anything anybody wants to share in regards to community outreach? No, okay. Moving right along, collecting metrics. You heard earlier this evening regarding from Human Relations Officer, Interim Human Relations Officer Joel Ridgeway, regarding gathering data and metrics with respect to complaints and issues happening in the county related to discrimination, not just fair housing, but discrimination. I am going to be having we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow with somebody from the personnel office. Tell me who it is. I'm having a brain cramp. Joelle, help me out.
Kelly Lovett.
Kelly Lovett, who's an attorney. Who does she work for? Is she the, what is her position in the county government?
She works in personnel, okay. And she is covering sort of the EEO portion of a lot of duties. So we have sort of split her position in half, where I am, I'm covering community, etc., and she is covering internal employment related complaints.
Okay. So I'm hoping to have a conversation with them and pull some ideas together and try to find a way that we can move forward to try to do a better job of tracking what's happening in the county, not only with respect to fair housing, but with respect to other issues related to discrimination, and hope to have a report back to you next month. So again, moving right along here, the agenda a little bit behind now. Recommendations regarding police reform. We had a great meeting last week ago, Thursday, the February the 11th, with the new county police chief, I would hope I'm saying that correctly, and her executive team. It was a great meeting. I was very glad to meet her. And I think we are, after having this discussion, what I would like to bring up for discussion this evening is what recommendations we might want to make with respect to police reforms, following up on what happened last summer and the Black Lives, the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. Over the summer, the commission published a number of recommendations that we wanted the police department and the county to make. Some of those were addressed, and we had a good discussion last week. I am going to propose as a starting point for our discussion in terms of what we want to do, that we give some serious consideration to recommending that Anne Arundel County pass a law similar to the law that was passed in Baltimore County bringing forth some reforms in their police department. Before I go into what these recommendations are, which I pulled directly out of it's called the Smart Policing Act from Baltimore County, and I provided you all with a copy of that legislation. I just want to tell you, I had never done this before, but I went ahead and jumped into the county code, looking at all the county laws concerning the police department, and I also looked at the county charter, and I was a little bit surprised how wide open it is. There are 2 provisions in the county charter that describe the authority of the chief of police and the functions of the police department. They're short 3-4 sentence paragraphs that sketch it out very broadly. Then the Anne Arundel County Code has a section in Article 12, the public safety article, and the police department has 2 subtitles. One's for school crossing guards and one's for disposition of unclaimed property. And that is it. So I was surprised. I thought that there would be more regulations on the book with respect to what the police can and cannot do. So be that as it may, I'm going to share my screen with you all. I think this will make it a little bit easier to have this conversation. If you bear with me one moment while I do that. And I did not have time to prepare slides, so you'll have to forgive me here. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so I went through the Smart Policing Act, and these are the categories of reforms that they implemented in Baltimore County. The first one concerning discipline, de-escalation, intervention, rendering aid, and use of force. Second one talked about police rights. Third, lateral hires, annual reporting, training, early intervention system, hearing board with public membership, then use of force, neck restraints prohibited, use of force, police records, a probationary period. Those were the 10 reforms that were recommended, that were made in the Smart Policing, not the recommendation. Those were the changes that were made in the Smart Policing Act to the law in Baltimore County affecting the police. I am suggesting that we, not only that we make these recommendations, or at least discuss them with the chief and see what might make sense and what doesn't make sense. But also, I think we should talk about a diversity policy for the police department, and we should also talk about combating white supremacist groups and racism, especially in light of the insurrection on January 6th. So I would like to, I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment here. I'd like to just have a discussion before I could certainly start going through my document here and going, basically I pulled out the what I thought was the most relevant language so that we could turn it into ultimately our recommendations that we could share with the police chief and ultimately the county executive and county council members. But before I do that, how do we want to proceed? I mean, we could spend some time just having some general discussions tonight. We could just dive in and go through these various recommendations. I'm open to any suggestions. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
I think the most fruitful use of our time would be to dive in and go through each specific recommendation with the proviso that we would discuss these first with the police chief. But if there was a situation where we could not reach agreement, we would then forward what we wanted forward. Okay. And letting the chief know, no offense, but we don't think, we think this needs to happen. So that's what we're going to do.
Commissioner Dodoni?
I apologize. I do not remember seeing on the list a discussion of body cameras. I know some changes have been made with respect to body cameras. I think we need to explicitly look at those regulations, especially in light of some challenges I've recently become aware of in this and other counties with respect to body cameras not being turned on when the events were happening.
Commissioner Dodoni, that's a really good point. That wasn't in the Baltimore County police recommendations. I know that the county is adopting body cameras. I know they're going to be turning them on at a certain date, but you're right. If we're going to go ahead and make some recommendations as to legislation, this might be an area that we might want to chime in on.
I'd like you to hear Chief Awad speak on Saturday as well, and the cameras they're looking at have some automatic features to turn them on either motion based or when a gun is drawn. In light of some of the cases coming up in court, I'm not sure that's sufficient. I believe it's worth clear understanding.
Okay. With that, let's continue to discuss that, and I think what I might do after our meeting is email you, Commissioner Dodoni, and ask for any more insights after you can ponder a little bit in terms of what we might want to consider recommending, especially in light of the discussion you had with the police chief on Saturday. But with that being said, Commissioner Peterson, you have another question?
No, just an observation. Derek Matthews has been transferred over to the police department to implement the body cameras and I think work with the citizens. So it would seem to me that we might ask Mr. Matthews to come and give us a detailed presentation on how the cameras work, what they do, what they don't do, how the data is going to be stored, and all that kind of stuff.
Sounds like a good idea. Before we start making recommendations, understand it a little bit better. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you again and dive into the recommendations from the Baltimore County, or the recommendations I suggest we should consider from the Baltimore County Smart Policing Act. All right, can you see my screen, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so the first series of recommendations would be with regard to discipline, de-escalation, intervention, rendering aid and use of force. And again, I pulled these straight out of the SMART Act. The police officer may be suspended as provided in the State Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights or the personnel rules for the police department. I have not seen the personnel rules for the police department in Anne Arundel County, but it's, from reading the SMART Act, it's my belief that they were trying to give the police chief the ability to take disciplinary action when appropriate per their personnel rules. Again, happy to discuss it, but let me move on into some of the specifics. A police officer shall comply with the rules adopted by the chief of police regarding attendance, conduct, training, discipline, and procedure. And those adopted rules shall include affirming that police officers hold the highest regard for the sanctity of human life and the dignity and value of all persons. I believe the county has that as part of their policies based on the recommendations made by the Mary, help me, what is it, the presidential? Are you there, Mary?
Yeah, the 21st Century Policing Act.
21st Century Policing Act. So number 2 here, affirming that police officers, when safe and reasonably possible, utilize de-escalation techniques as proactive action and approach to stabilize the situation safely so that wartime options and resources may be available to gain voluntary compliance in order to reduce or eliminate the need to use force. Again, as I understand it, this is basically the policy that the county has in place. And what we're talking here again is turning this not into a policy, but turning it into legislation. Number 3, requiring intervention by a police officer to stop the use of excessive force by another police officer, requiring prompt reporting of any such incident, and prohibiting retaliation against any police officer who complies with such intervention and reporting policies. Number 4, requiring a police officer to render aid, including a request for emergency medical assistance consistent with his or her training when safe and feasible to do so for any person in police custody with an obvious injury or complaint of injury. Number 5, providing that a police officer may only use objectively reasonable, necessary, and proportional force to accomplish their lawful duties. Number 6, requiring a police officer to report if, after the use of physical force, a person is injured, complains of injury in the presence of a police officer, complains of pain that persists beyond the use of a controlled technique, physical force is applied using a protective instrument, strikes, or a department canine, or a firearm is discharged other than in training. So that's sort of the first series of recommendations that this get turned into a law, that the police officers are required to comply with these basically 6 provisions governing de-escalation, intervention, rendering aid, and use of force. Mary.
I want to apologize to the entire county of Anne Arundel for being such a nuisance. We're going to have an opportunity to have this come to public discussion, starting with a police hearing that is being broadcast to 2 locations Wednesday morning. It's about an incident where a police officer is accused of kneeling on the neck of a person detained. And these laws were on the book at that time, I believe. Need to confirm that.
Mary, what's the nature of that hearing?
So sorry, my speaker wasn't on. It's a police hearing. It's actually a police hearing, and it's being the police department.
The police department is conducting it, and they're opening it up to the public.
They are broadcasting it to the Southern District Police Station and the Northern District Police Station community rooms, which are also warming rooms. Huh. So there's limited visibility. I know that members of the United Black representatives from the United Black Clergy and the NAACP will be present at the Northern District location, and I believe Chief Awad has arranged for an additional streaming, not public streaming, put to another site in Odenton. And there will be a press conference between the NAACP and the United Black Clergy at noon on Wednesday. The laws are, perhaps this is analogous to our reading of the hate and bias crimes regulations that we started off with this meeting, where Commissioner Peterson and I and others had the opportunity to talk to Major Goodwin. They look great. The implementation may be a question. I want to also add to this that when we spoke with Chief Awad last week, she confirmed and affirmed that the training for the Anne Arundel County Police does not include chokeholds, does not include knees on neck, but neither is there any indication, in my perspective, that it is forbidden. I believe that there is a desire of the community to take this to the point of forbidding those actions. And if we wish to stay in touch with the community, those are, we should, I believe, stay tuned to what's happening around that hearing.
Definitely. And again, we're going to get to it later on. There is an affirmative prohibition against neck restraints that we're going to go over. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
I agree with Mary, and the reason I think it's important to codify these policies into law is something that former chief said to me in a meeting. Many things that are awful are lawful, and my idea is if it's awful, it should not be lawful, and the only way you can get that done is through legislation. And that would, I think, encourage the police department to take a look at their policies, and now they have a law on board, what do we have to do to make sure that we're in compliance with the law? So I think it's really important that these things be put into law.
Commissioner Klopsaddle?
Well, I agree with Mary and Commissioner Peterson, but I want us to be careful about trying to move too fast. I think one of the keys to this is the use of cameras, how that's defined, because that will be proof. And that will help us in all of this as we go toward codification. If we just come out and make certain demands, I think we're going to be shot down, because the police chief does not want to lose his or her authority. And we need to have, I think, a couple of things that I find very important. One is that we need to have reports of this not delayed for 5 days. I can't remember exactly where that is, Commissioner Veloso. And two, that the use of cameras, we have to have some idea of how reliable that will be in terms of giving us a fair picture of what happens.
Yeah, that delay for 5 days, I believe that's in the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, where a police officer who's accused of impropriety doesn't have to has 5 days before he's officially questioned, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I think that is just, that's shameful. No one else has that. And I think that's something that's a non-negotiable thing.
Okay.
You know, and the second thing, I can't remember the exact second thing I was thinking about when I'm dealing with all of this. Oh, the other thing is that we definitely need a citizens review. Those were the two big things that jumped out at me, and I'm not an expert in any of this, and I would defer to Commissioner Didoni and Commissioner Peterson.
Right. Okay. Let me I think we have a little bit of time here. I want to keep going through some of these recommendations, and ultimately what I think what I'm going to do after our meetings, I'm going to put these in writing. I'm going to turn it into a draft email, which I want to circulate. And my idea would be to send this email to the police chief to get her input. And I'm sensitive to the fact that I believe that the police chief is trying to improve the relationship that the police department has with the community. And I think she's somebody that we want to ally with and work with. So I think we need to be sensitive to that, but I also think we need to be sensitive to the fact that the community has been crying for reform for a very long time, and it just isn't happening. So let me continue to share with you the other provisions that were in the Smart Policing Act that we may or may not want to make. But again, I'm going to share with you tonight. We'll have a little bit of discussion. Then we will, I'm going to email them to you all so you can consider and provide me some feedback in writing. The second set of recommendations or changes in the Smart Policing Act in Baltimore County was of police rights. I thought it was interesting. And again, I think this is codified under state law, but now they're codifying it under the county law in Baltimore County. The chief and all police officers shall have and enjoy all the immunities of defense available to sheriffs, constables, police, and peace officers in any suit, civil or criminal, brought against them in consequence of acts or omissions done in the course of their official duties. Police officers shall be paid a salary as specified in the county classification and compensation plan and as provided in the budget. To me, my sense is that's kind of the law already. And I'm not sure why they decided to put that in the Smart Policing Act, but we certainly could consider doing that as well if it makes the police feel a little bit more comfortable. Go ahead, Commissioner Didoni. You're on mute.
I apologize for being slow on that. One of the issues in Baltimore County is the substantial overtime amount of money that police on street police can make, effectively raising their salaries, their compensation to a very high level. So as we look at compensation, we may want to consider salary and what overtime and additional hours, how those are compensated. That problem does not exist in Anne Arundel County. Anne Arundel County police are paid less than the surrounding counties. It's a problem here. So the salary issue and the compensation issues are worth some deep and nuanced evaluation.
Okay, Commissioner Peterson.
I think they put this in their legislation because if you want to get this thing passed, you got to put it in there because there will be strong opposition from the police union and I think even from the Black police union in terms of this issue. So I think it's critical that this be in there to say we're not going to take any of your rights away. They may change because Libor is being discussed, but whatever Libor says, our county is going to follow it. And I think that's why they put it in there. And I think it's smart to do that.
Okay. Lateral hires, a person who has previously been employed as a police officer of the department or in another jurisdiction or agency and has had their employment terminated or has resigned in connection with a pending sustained disciplinary proceeding shall be ineligible for hire as a police officer. You know, they provided a caveat here, unless a person's application has been reviewed and approved by the chief of police. And shoot, I'm not even sure we want to have that caveat. I mean, if someone gets fired for a disciplinary issue, that raises my concern. Go ahead, Commissioner Clapsaddle.
I absolutely agree with you about that statement.
Right.
That is absolutely unacceptable.
Okay.
But one thing I wanted to mention about what Commissioner Dodoni said, I'm not clear, Commissioner Dodoni, your concern with overtime, because I know this is true all over the country. I know in Los Angeles and Chicago and New York, other major metropolitan areas, they have the issue. So could you just, because I'm not certain we want to get involved in the administration of salaries and personnel issues.
I mean, Commissioner Dodoni, is your thought that there's more of an incentive to arrest people so that there's court time and therefore overtime? Is that what you're thinking?
Absolutely not.
Okay. No. Okay.
Absolutely not. And our police are undercompensated in Anne Arundel County. There was a sense, at least I detected a sense in reporting for the Baltimore Sun, of exploitation of the overtime benefits in Baltimore. When one looks at compensation, it has many components. I don't want to get into the administration of that at all. It's not our realm. It's not our work. I think as we look at it, any issue related to salary, I need to be more informed. I have to have a more sophisticated and nuanced perspective than I would have from just looking at the word salary.
I might even want to take out that provision entirely with respect to salary, just stick to the provision about the police officers having their rights protected under the law as are currently protected. Commissioner Peterson, did you have another question?
Just a point, and I believe this happened when we spoke with Chief Alwood. She said, just like the legislation says, that there are instances when she reviews applications and she makes a decision. So I think that's a police chief prerogative that I would be inclined to let the police chief have.
So give her ultimate
yes
authority. Okay.
She's the professional in this area. We're not.
Right. She's the one that would get fired by the county executive if she doesn't do a good job. Yeah. Annual reporting, the chief of police or a person designated by the chief shall submit to the county executive and the county council an annual report on crime trends in the county, the use of force by the county police officers, and any other crime and policing related information the department deems appropriate, and shall within 1 month of its submission present the report to the council in a meeting that is open to the public. I want to point out, again, it's not a law in Anne Arundel County, but currently the police does issue an annual report. It's posted on their website. They've got reports on there regarding use of force. I personally think that the information they provide on their website regarding use of force they provide some numbers, but I think we need demographic data to go along with the numbers, because I think that's something that a lot of people in the county are concerned about, that certain groups are more end up being encountering this use of force issues more frequently than other groups. And so I think having a little bit more information would be good. And there's a recommendation later on that we're going to get to that basically states that specifically with respect to use of excessive force, it calls for the reporting of certain information. Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to have this provision in because I'm thinking of my time on the school board again, and we instituted a workforce diversity policy, but we made it a requirement that policy, the report is part of the policy, be presented to the full school board every year. And I think the police department should have to present their report before the full county council every year. And that's why you might want this in the.
I'm going to jump around because there was not a diversity policy in the Smart Policing Act, but I do think we should have a diversity policy. And I just took a crack at starting to work on some language. The department shall formally adopt a policy to increase the recruitment and retention of underrepresented groups employed by the department as police officers. As part of this policy, the department shall disclose on a yearly basis demographic data regarding recruitment, hiring, and promotional practices, and set hiring goals for achieving a workforce representative of county demographics. So I had the very same issue in my mind. I mean, one of the ways that we can combat a lot of the problems that the community complains about the department is by having a more diverse police force. And I think having it in law would be a good thing. So I definitely, again, it wasn't part of the Smart Policing Act, but I do think we should make this recommendation. Thoughts, opinions? All right, are you trying to say something, Commissioner Peterson? No, okay, I'm gonna go back to where we were. Okay, and training. Police officers, again, recommendation from the Smart Policing Act, not a recommendation, a change in the Smart Policing Act that I think we should recommend is a police officer shall receive the training required by the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission and additional training in law enforcement, community relations, and related subjects as determined by the County Chief of Police. At least yearly, all police officers shall receive and successfully complete additional training and instruction in the use of de-escalation techniques, implicit bias, and the use of physical and lethal force, including techniques for interacting with vulnerable persons. To me, that's a no-brainer in terms of a recommendation that we should make. I'm going to keep going unless somebody has a comment. Early intervention system, the police chief spoke about this. The county has one. Again, I think we should make it county law. The department shall implement an early intervention system to identify police officers who are at risk of engaging in the use of excessive or unnecessary force, and to provide those officers with training, appropriate behavioral interventions, reassignments, or other appropriate responses to reduce such risk. All right, hearing board with public membership. I believe this is the equivalent of the Serious Incident Review Board. I think we might want to modify this. So right now, the Smart Policing Act, the change they made up in Baltimore County, subject to the collective bargaining agreement with the chief of police. The chief of police may select up to 2 voting or non-voting members of the public who have received training administered by the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission on the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights and matters relating to police procedures. I think we should recommend it that be made into law. The increasing the number of members of the public that serve on the Serious Incident Review Board, but I also think we should take it a step further. We've talked about it that the county should create a civilian review board that is empowered to provide police oversight consistent with whatever happens to the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. So I'm going to keep going. If somebody has a question, speak up because I'm reading, and if I don't see your hand, so just tell me to stop. All right, use of force, neck restraint prohibited. A police officer may not use a neck restraint except in defense against death or serious bodily injury. Neck restraint means any hold or restraint of the neck that is intended to restrict the flow of oxygen or blood to the brain, including but not limited to a chokehold, stranglehold, or carotid restraint. This is very, very similar to the policy that was implemented last summer. There's maybe a few changes in the language. You know, we could try to come up with something that's worded a little bit more strongly. I guess personally, I feel that we might have a greater chance of passing something similar to what was passed up in Baltimore County. But again, any comments or thoughts, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on going. All right. Use of force, police records. Here we go. The department shall collect and analyze information on the use of force by police officers, including instruments, date, time, and location, type of call for service, the number of officers using force in the incident, unit and assignment of officers using force, demographics such as gender, race, or ethnicity, rank, number of years with the department, and the number of years as a sworn police officer. For each officer using force, the demographics of persons on whom force was used, including gender, race, or ethnicity, and age, and the outcome of any investigation regarding the use of force. The department shall collect and analyze information about all police-involved shootings and police-involved deaths of persons. The department shall publish statistical information and release all data collected under this section. I think this is something I think many of you will agree that this is information the community wants. But again, thoughts or comments? I'm going to keep going. Again, this is the beginning of our conversation. So if you think of something later, and again, I'm going to email you these, we can continue the conversation. Probationary period. I don't quite understand why they did this, but in any case, the probationary period for a newly appointed officer is 2 years from the date of appointment, except that the probationary period for an officer with the time of appointment has not less than 2 years of experience. In other words, more than 2 years experience as a sworn officer, and approved by the Maryland Police Training and Standards Commission. Waiver full entrance level training shall for a period, probation will be for 1 year. So if they have two or more years of experience, it's a 1 year probationary period. If they're a police officer for the first time, 2 years. I have no problem making the recommendation, but I honestly do not know what the rationale is, other than I imagine under the collective bargaining agreement, it is easier to fire a police officer who is in the probationary period than someone who has gotten past the probationary period. Okay, moving right along, we talked about the diversity policy. All right, combating white supremacist groups and racism. So we spoke a little bit about this when the police chief was here, and she left me with the impression that there are some policies in place. I think the police department should go a little further, and this needs to be turned into law. These recommendations that I've got here are based on recommendations made by the Brennan Center with respect to what police departments should do to combat white supremacist groups. I'm just going to read it. The department shall establish clear policies to the extent permitted by law and collective bargaining agreements regarding participation in white supremacist organizations and other far-right militant groups, and on overt and explicit expressions of racism, with specificity regarding tattoos, patches, and insignia, as well as social media postings. The department shall establish mitigation plans when biased police officers are detected. The mitigation plan shall include referral to internal affairs, local prosecutors, or the Department of Justice for investigation and prosecution, termination, or other disciplinary action. Limitations of assignments to reduce potentially problematic contact with the public, restraining and intensified supervision and auditing. And the department shall establish a reporting mechanism to ensure evidence of overtly racist behavior by a police officer is provided to prosecutors, and employ Brady lists or similar reporting mechanisms to ensure defendants receive notice. And the department shall implement a whistleblower policy and procedures for the submission of concerns regarding questionable professional conduct or violations of laws and departmental rules or regulations by fellow police officers on a confidential and anonymous basis. These policies and procedures shall provide protections from retaliatory actions for the police officer reporting the concern. And those are, I thought this would be a good place to start. This is a lot of information. I've sent you copies of the actual Smart Policing Act. I'm going to go ahead and send you a copy of this so you can review it, ponder it. And like I said, I'm also going to work on drafting a letter to the police chief to start this conversation about our desire to have the county take affirmative action in making some of these reforms, regardless of what's going to happen with the law enforcement officer bill of rights. Thoughts, comments, discussions, concerns? Man, I guess I put no, there we go. Go ahead, Commissioner Clapsaddle. I thought I put everybody to sleep.
You didn't put us to sleep, but I want to thank you so much for doing the heavy lifting here, because I think it's helpful to have this kind of summary and discussion. And so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Clapsaddle. Thank you. All right, anybody else? Did we lose Commissioner Didoni? I think we did. She was leaving for another meeting. All right. We got a very brief update earlier from our Human Relations Officer with respect to the recently filed fair housing complaint. This was, as you might recall, we received a complaint from someone alleging disability discrimination, and the allegations were that the condo association were discriminating against her because they were not permitting her to let me see, it was have a designated handicap parking space and make some modifications to the premises that would give her easier access. We had the help of the County Office of Law, since this was the first fair housing complaint that we received, where there were some substantial allegations made, and the Office of Law confirmed, and Human Relations Officer Ridgeway is correct in that this complaint was did not make a prima facie case that there was evidence indicating that county fair housing law had been violated. Specifically, she wasn't being denied the opportunity to rent or purchase a property. Her complaint that she was being prohibited access, and that is not covered under the county law. It's not covered under the state law. It's not covered under federal law. I reviewed the letter that the Human Relations Officer sent. I could tell you it was a good letter. She gave her some good options. It sounds as if this individual is going to have an opportunity to pursue redress for some of her claims with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights and possibly the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And if I recall correctly, I believe she indicated she was going to pursue that. Is that correct, Joelle?
That is correct.
Yeah.
In terms of the parking, the request
right.
for reasonable accommodation for parking.
Right.
The other two issues in terms of, accessibility, and then, the sidewalk, et cetera, because the home was built pre-ADA, that complicates things. But then also, fair housing, a lot of times the tenant or the person that lives there needs to make the modification.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Next item on the agenda, follow-up regarding our annual report. I'm going to be meeting with the county executive one-on-one to hopefully have an in-depth discussion and an opportunity to convince them to move forward with some of our recommendations. I know that Commissioner Gaskin has been in touch with County Council Member Volke, and he indicated that he would be taking a look at the recommendations that we have made. I haven't had an opportunity to reach out to Councilwoman Rodvian, but I will be shortly, since I'm in her district. And I urge you all to, when you can, try to reach out to your county council member and at least encourage them to take a look at the report and consider some of these recommendations. Any comments? This is something that we'll continue to follow up on at our next meeting. As we move forward, I'll report back on what I hear from the county executive. Any comments, any questions regarding this issue? Okay. Next item on the agenda, we don't have any new business. After that, go ahead, Commissioner Klopstow. You're on mute.
Are you dealing with new business now, or are you skipping over that?
Well, we don't have any new business, but if you, we're gonna move right on to good and welfare, we could certainly bring up anything you want to bring up there.
Well, I wanted to bring up, the contact that was made with you about LGBT.
That's where
choosing our schools.
And that's where I was going next, but you're more than welcome to start the conversation.
The second thing I wanted to bring up is, and it has to do specifically with our codified mission of fair housing, is that there is currently in the Maryland House of Delegates, there are two bills, one in the Senate and one in the House, which would codify a lot of rights for LGBTQ plus individuals. And I would like for us to support this. The bill in the Senate is SB 0768, and it's headed by Senator Washington. And there's a hearing on that on March the 9th, and it's in the Judicial Committee. And the House bill is 1088, and that's Delegate Acevero. There are, of course, policies about the LGBTQ plus community, but these would be codifications, which are important to protect them from further disengagement.
Commissioner Klopstow, can you I'll tell you, generally speaking, I personally am fully supportive of the legislation. I don't know the specifics, but I imagine I could support it. I believe before the commission were to take a vote on the issue, I think we should have an opportunity to review the legislation. Can you send us, or if you send it to me, I'll circulate it to the group.
I will do that.
So
I realize that that's important. You shouldn't just take my word. But there's a lot going on, and it's kind of tied into also what's happening in the county Board of Education. So I'm looking forward to all of this.
Yeah, so as Commissioner Klopstow mentioned, we were contacted by a group called the WISE LGBTQ plus Advocacy Huddle, and they're a group that is asking us to publicly support the county school board adopting a policy and regulations that would benefit the LGBTQ plus students in the school system. Just heard from them, I think it was just last week. My intention is to go ahead and forward the policy and the regulations for you all to review. And my hope was to have a discussion, and I was hoping that we could take a vote at our next meeting, whether this was something that we could publicly support. And from my perspective, if assuming we could support it, that we would offer up a resolution in support of these policies and regulations. I've reached out to the county executive's office with respect to his position on the issue. Haven't heard back yet, but I think from my perspective, this is a good discussion item, good agenda item, not only in terms of supporting these policies and regulations in the school board being adopted, but also the legislation that Commissioner Klopstow mentioned. Go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
In addition, you should probably also reach out to the superintendent, George Arlotto, and find out where they're at on it, and the president of the school board also.
Yeah, I had a brief email exchange with one of the members of the school board who left me with the impression that she believes it's likely that they're going to be adopted. But I need to follow up with her, but that's a good point to check with Superintendent Arlotto, see what his position is on the issue. But yeah, so I just wanted to tell you all this is coming. I'm gonna make every effort to send an email out to you folks this week with the policy and the regulations for the school. Hopefully, Commissioner Clapsal can get me copies of the legislation so we could review that also. And then I will also, again, send you the recommendations we discussed with respect to the police. Any questions? Is there anything further we should discuss this evening? No? Okay. Only other announcement I have is that we have our next monthly virtual meeting on Thursday, March 18th at 6 p.m. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming to our meeting this evening. If I could just have a motion to adjourn, a quick second.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It is 7:45 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Everybody stay safe and watch out for the ice.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.